told you, year 4 was my favorite year in the 4-year cycle of phases. So as we move into quarter 3, we will read and learn about the Roaring Twenties, the Great Depression, progressive reform, the events that led to the Second World War, and the post-war prosperity of the 50s through the lens of justice, glory versus honor, and courage. And we will apply these ideas as we read through our literature and study the value of listening through stories and adventure and heroism in a Beatrix Potter treasury. What the courage of family and self-sacrifice mean in Number the Stars, as well as what bullying and remorse and forgiveness looks like in The 100 Dresses. What it really means to love your country and to love your family through sacrifice in Snow Treasure. And while reading and studying these themes in our classic novels, we will also look at the parallels between the stories and what was happening in the world at the time when the stories were written. While we study Hebrews and Thessalonians, we will be looking closely at the philosophies of world leaders and scientists of the period and how their policies changed the culture in America and around the world, while learning what it means to remain faithful to God in times of persecution. Throughout the third quarter, we will apply the overarching understanding that Jesus Christ is the ultimate supremacy and sufficiency as the revealer and mediator of God's grace. So we as Christians should stay comforted and motivated and encouraged through the trials and tribulations in this life because of the promise of Jesus' return. So then we move into quarter 4, and we'll look at the beauty, virtue, and change within the culture as we read about the philosophies and policies of world leaders, new scientific discoveries, events, relationships with other nations, and ultimately the outcome of this year's election. We will look at the symbolism between history and the current times through the classic novels we will read, while we study the themes of good versus evil, betrayal, forgiveness, courage, and transformation in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and what survival and hope look like in Mr. Popper's Penguins, and what it means to cooperate and work together for a common goal, as well as what it looks like to adapt and be resourceful while learning about the nature of war in Welcome to Molly's World, and how accepting differences and friendship and cooperation, imagination versus reality is portrayed in Winnie the Pooh. In Charlotte's Web, we will understand what perseverance is. And finally, through the eyes of a young boy, we will wrestle with faith and survival in the face of mortality and terror in the book, I Survived the Attacks on 9/11. And through the literature discussions and through the study of Daniel and Revelations in the Bible, we will be able to look closely and begin to understand not only the changes happening in the world and in American culture through the current day, but we will also be able to understand that God is not finished with America as a nation, and that God still does have an order of events for all of us to go through, and that our culture is still a significant place in his plan as we continue to go through trials and tribulations, because it is within those trials and tribulations where we come together in Jesus Christ, and that it is through the hope of the second coming of Jesus Christ when the best characteristics of the human race are revealed.